I'm Tom Campbell from Cultaholic, and I am taking on cases that wrestling scholars, sports entertainment sleuths, and gumshoes of the graps have left unsolved. And this time, centre stage goes to centre stage. It was Monday Night Raw on June the 23rd, 2008. It was a 3-hour WWE Draft special as the superstars were shaken up once again because of reasons. It was also, as well as the draft, the night of Vince McMahon's Million Dollar Mania. We've seen some moments during Million Dollar Mania, haven't we? Randomly selected numbers bringing up confused callers on the other end, a Rick Astley answer phone message at one point, and providing you could give Vince McMahon the password, a lot of money divvied out to the WWE Universe. It was a great idea in theory, but watching Vince McMahon deal with all these bad connections and confused callers, it became a bit of a cringe fest, let's be honest. Throughout the night, Vince McMahon would just get more and more frustrated with the technology, and it would go from cringy to catastrophic in pretty short time at the end of the night. Just as Vince McMahon was stepping onto the stage to give out the final big money amount to a wrestling fan, something felt amiss. As, first of all, a piece of the stage gave way as he was just finishing up the phone call, and shortly after that, the stage itself collapsed beneath him, crushing him under the debris of Million Dollar Mania. Many wrestlers, including Triple H, rushed to try and save Vince McMahon, who was saying that he couldn't feel his legs and he couldn't get up. There was a lot of panic as Monday Night Raw came to an end. However, we wouldn't see or hear from Vince McMahon for quite some time after this, as he was recuperating from this freak accident. A freak accident, or a deliberate ploy to take Vince McMahon out of the game. Who destroyed the stage? Now, it's normally at this time where we take a look at who it couldn't be. As we put together our case file of construction destruction, we realise that there's very few people who couldn't have done it, as it was a draft night. All the stars from Raw, SmackDown, and ECW were present and correct. And that would have no doubt meant the entire of the WWE locker room and beyond were present that night as Million Dollar Mania was going down. So on this occasion, everyone is a suspect. However, there are a few that are more suspect than others. Our first suspect is the styling, profiling, jet flying, limousine riding, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, stage dropping Ric Flair. Now, don't think for a single second that someone like Ric Flair isn't capable of underhanded tactics like dropping a stage on somebody. Ric Flair made a career out of being the dirtiest player in the game. Basically, if he was to go to court for this, his entire wrestling in-ring life would be Exhibits A through Z. Ric Flair was on Raw that night as well. He was stood next to Vince McMahon, helping him give away $100,000, and even shook the chairman's hand. This all seems a bit cozy, doesn't it, between Ric Flair and Vince McMahon? Think about this, right? It was this level of coziness that we saw between Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels in 2003. Just a few weeks after that bit of coziness, Ric Flair gave Shawn Michaels the old low blow, called him a Ric Flair wannabe. After the races we go. Just because Ric Flair will shake your hand and look you in the eye doesn't mean he's being sincere. He's made a career out of this. And also, you have to bear in mind that Ric Flair does have legitimate beef with Vince McMahon at this point. Ric Flair is now retired from wrestling. And that reason that retirement came about, the reason we had that match against Shawn Michaels, the I'm sorry, I love you moment that put Ric Flair out of wrestling altogether, was because of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, who said, the next time you lose Ric Flair, you are out of the wrestling ring forever. So Ric Flair's retirement, just a few months before this, was really taken out of his hands and placed firmly into the hands of Vince McMahon. Ric Flair had been neutered by the chairman of WWE. Do you really think he was just going to accept that and move on? Do you really think Ric Flair is the man that's going to play happy with the guy that told him he will never wrestle again? Ric Flair has a history of smiling sweetly while stabbing you in the back, which makes him a prime suspect. And when we ask the question, did Ric Flair drop the stage on Vince McMahon, we say no. No, he didn't. You see, if we were using history as a template, this isn't a Ric Flair type of attack. Now, Ric Flair has done some underhanded things, so much so, some of them are underlegged throughout his time in the wrestling ring. But in terms of this kind of destruction of a set to bring someone down, no, it's not his issue. Ric Flair has no problem getting his hands dirty in the wrestling ring and having the whole world know that it was him that did it. So why would he hide? If Ric Flair was going to drop the stage on Vince McMahon, he'd be on the stage pulling a lever. There is, however, a guy under the tutelage of Ric Flair, learning the ropes of being the dirtiest player in the game, who isn't so forthcoming about being so forthcoming. He is a guy with a history of violent attacks that have been a manner most cerebral. Our next suspect is Triple H, a man who has gone to battle with the chairman on many occasions over the last few decades. 1999, stealing his daughter away from him. They engaged in not just a brutal match on SmackDown ahead of Unforgiven 1999, but they went to war at Armageddon 1999 as well. And this would be an issue that would keep coming up within the WWF. In 2006, Triple H got Shawn Michaels back on side and they formed that damn DX. And Triple H spent his entire time in 2006 basically making Vince McMahon's life miserable in many different ways. Now, not just by beating up people that he had got behind, not just by playing silly pranks, but also just messing about behind the scenes. You know that time when he drew a face on the screen as Vince was talking, how he was changing his voice? That time where they dumped all horrible mess on top of Vince and Shane and the Spirit Squad? How funny was that? How interesting that Triple H has so many connections with people who work behind the scenes at WWE. But surely Triple H and Vince McMahon are all right at this point. It was Triple H who ran straight over to Vince McMahon after the stage fell. I saw that. We all did. But we've seen that many times before with Triple H, haven't we? A Triple H production normally results in some elaborate type of destruction that leads to a lot of character acting for Triple H and his friends around him. We only have to look to Survivor Series 1999, how Triple H paid off Rikishi to run down Stone Cold Steve Austin, all the while playing the innocent guy in all of this. I can't believe it. 2002, when Shawn Michaels was beaten up in the parking lot, Triple H was like, I can't believe this happened to you, we'll find who did it. It was Triple H all the time. So, an elaborate stage collapsing and Triple H rushing over to be the first there. It has all the trappings of a Triple H production. Take a boo. Give yourself an Emmy, the game. Was it Triple H that dropped the stage on Vince McMahon in an attempt to gain control of the company once and for all? No. No, he actually didn't. There was tension between Triple H and Vince McMahon in recent times, but there was also a lot of respect, you see. When the stage fell on Vince, the name he called out was Paul. And Triple H, that's his real name. It wasn't a case of Vince calling for Triple H, it was Vince calling for Paul. It'll be a few more years for Triple H to become more of an authoritative member in WWE. So at this point, he was a full-time active wrestler, and he was WWE champion. So having Vince McMahon around was actually serving the game rather well at this point. So the person responsible for taking Vince McMahon out couldn't have been Triple H. After all, he was doing all right with Vince McMahon hanging around him. So they had to be someone who was keen to push on, because people like Vince McMahon didn't want them around. So it had to be somebody who was to benefit from Vince not being there. But who could that be? Maybe maybe it wasn't a wrestler at all. Maybe it was somebody who worked around the wrestling ring. Maybe it was a sports announcer with ideas of grandeur. I present to you the suspect, Mike Adamle. Adamle wasn't a stranger to announcing, as we know. He was a college football guy, the voice of American Gladiators. Basically, sports entertainment. Adamle was working at NBC before signing with WWE, and according to some of the sources, Adamle was brought into the WWE from Vince McMahon via NBC's Dick Ebersol. So Dick was a big fan. NBC had promoted XFL all these years, so McMahon really did owe Dick a solid. Stop it. So he offered Mike Adamle a job per the request of Dick Ebersol. That's how the story goes. So Adamle debuted at the 2008 Royal Rumble, and it went really well for about 6 seconds. Adamle then called Jeff Harvey. He then went downhill pretty quickly from there. Adamle's confidence shot, and Vince McMahon's faith in Adamle dropped, almost like a stage would drop. Mike Adamle was seen as a guy that could potentially be a new top announcer for WWE. However, after many fumblings like the ones we've just discussed, he was relegated to ECW, the third brand of WWE. It was very apparent that his confidence was shot to pieces at that point. Adamle, on the 29th of April, just as the main event of ECW was starting, put down his headset and left the building. Now, the story goes that Adamle had been chewed out by Vince McMahon through his headset throughout the night and simply had enough. He walked out into the ECW arena where they filmed SmackDown and apologised the following week. Adamle had a lot of detractors backstage. Vince McMahon, as the head of this particular pack, was not a fan of his work. However, there were many executives within the company that still saw Mike Adamle as somebody with a lot to offer the WWE, doing more than announcing for ECW. There was real potential for him to be more. One of those who really had his back was Shane McMahon. Now, Shane, by this point, had developed relationships outside of WWE. He wasn't around as much as his sister or his dad was. And despite this, the fact that he was able to curry the Big Show Floyd Mayweather match for WrestleMania says that he still has a fair bit of pull in and around wrestling. Shane valued the legitimacy of sports like the UFC and the legitimacy that someone like Mike Adamle could bring to WWE. He was indeed a top sports broadcaster who just had a rough start to WWE. That was what Shane McMahon believes anyway. The biggest detractor for Mike Adamle was unfortunately the top one, that being Vince McMahon. So, knowing that Adamle was sick of being the butt of the jokes, sick of being on the receiving end of Vince McMahon's rollickings on the regular, and knowing that as long as Vince McMahon was in charge of the company, he was just going to stagnate on the third brand for WWE. Now, I'm not saying that Mike Adamle was the one that was cutting the cables and destroying the platform. No, I don't think he's capable of doing it. But I bet he knows some people in ECW that know how to cut the cables and destroy the platform. And ECW, guys, would have wanted Mike Adamle out of the promotion anyway. So, of course, they would help him get back into the good books of the main WWE roster. And also, if you notice that when Vince McMahon hits the ground, you get Raw guys checking on him, you get SmackDown guys checking on him. No ECW guys. Interested? During Vince McMahon's absence, Shane and Stephanie needed to install somebody to run the show. And Shane McMahon put forward his friend, sports analyst Mike Adamle, who assumed the role of general manager. So Vince McMahon, who had prominently been in the way of Mike Adamle doing anything more than commentary on WWE CW, no longer there, and now Mike Adamle running the show. The job ended up being too much for Mike Adamle. He ended up emotionally resigning from the role on November the 3rd after an altercation with Randy Orton. It simply proved too much to run the WWE. This, however, does not exonerate him, as Mike Adamle, who became an authority figure in the absence of Vince McMahon, I do believe was the one who orchestrated his biggest roadblock being pushed out of the way, nay, dropped out of the way. Did Mike Adamle orchestrate the stage collapse on Vince McMahon? Yes. Yes, he did. And that, to quote CM, is a pipe bomb. If you have any wrestling unsolved mysteries you would like me to dust off and unmystify, let me know in the comments below. My name is Tom Campbell, and I will see you next crime.